Okay, we're live, and I hear Kate's dog.
Oh, right up there.
This is our artist spotlight with the Northwest Minnesota Arts Council. I'm Kristin Eggerling. I'm the promotions specialist. Today we have Kate Hammer of Pretty Dirty Pottery, and Kate's got an exhibit in our gallery right now. So, Trey, maybe you can introduce yourself, and then Kate, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Trey Everett, the showcase specialist. I just realized you guys look very professional with your tagline of your full name, and I just put Trey. So yeah, I work with the Northwest Minnesota Arts Council and work with galleries. And so this gallery that's currently exhibiting, it's Kate Hammer's work, and so we're going to find out a lot about her work and about Kate herself. And so I always enjoy our spotlights. So Kate, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kate Hammer. I'm located in Roseville, Minnesota. I'm an independent ceramic artist, working right out of my home and just doing the best I can.
Okay. Perfect.
Great.
Trey, do you want to maybe talk about the exhibit a little bit more,
Sure.
and then Kate could as well?
Yeah. So this exhibit is titled "The Art of Addiction," and that's just the title. So people can submit whatever work they wanted around that subject, whatever that means to them. And this started about a year ago when Kate was in the Northwest exhibit, and she had some of her ceramic houses. Is that what they are? And I remember, Kate, you approached me and said, I'd be interested in having an exhibit here showcasing some of my work. And so we just kept talking. And then this theme came up, and I thought it was a great theme. And Kate gave the title to it. And so that's kind of how this started. And so we've got most of the exhibit is Kate's work. A few acrylic paintings, but mostly ceramics. And then there are some other artists in our region that also submitted some work. And I may say something about that in a little bit. But that's the exhibit, and it goes until, I wrote this down, May 2nd, we will take the exhibit down. So May 1st will be the last day to see the exhibit. And then we have an online version of the exhibit. If you can't make it there in person, you can go to our website, Northwest Minnesota Arts Council. And then there's a reception. We're having a reception for Kate and for the exhibit in general. And that reception is on April 6th. And that is a Wednesday, I believe, Thursday.
I think it's a Thursday.
Thursday, thanks. So that's a Thursday evening, and that's at Northland Community and Technical College in Thief River Falls in their gallery. And that's from 5 to 7 that evening, April 6th. So that's a little bit about the exhibit.
Great. Kate, do you want to talk about your work in the exhibit, or how this idea came?
I sure can. So I am a person living in recovery from chemical dependency, and part of recovery is that all the things that I never thought I could ever do or accomplish in active addiction, they're possible now. And one of the things I thought was challenging for me as an artist is to be able to share my experience, strength, and hope that recovery is possible. And art is my way of sharing stories and making people think. I want people to have to stop, maybe get a little uncomfortable, and, just maybe evaluate their life. And that's kind of the purpose and goal for this exhibit, because, at any time and wherever we are in life, it is not a bad idea to just pause for a minute. And when I was in active addiction, one thing I always told myself is that when the time comes, I'm going to have a voice, and I hope to help some people who may be struggling in their own life or their own addiction. And this was my way of doing that. And so I did this gallery show for me to share with everyone else. And people can take what they want from it. But for me, it is personal. It's important. It is my life. And even today, not living in active addiction, I think about addiction every single day. I talk about it a lot. It is not something that I carry shame or guilt about anymore. But when I was in active addiction, that was the last thing I wanted to talk about, because it was such a hard time of life. And today life is good, but there are no guarantees. So that's why I feel it's important to get this subject out there and open up the conversation, and being able to really dig deep into our lives and hopefully save someone from hurting themselves and going down a really, really hard path. So when I approached Trey, I kind of shocked myself about it. But creating for this gallery show has opened up opportunities in many ways. I'm really, really grateful to have this opportunity, because not only is it in a public place where people can see it in person, but I'm able to share online a lot. And through this show, I've had people reaching out to me who are struggling, and I can't fix them, but I can point them in the direction, or at least share my own story with them. And for me, going through the process, that was one of the biggest things, was hearing people's story and knowing that life really sucked at some point, but it can get better. And so that is basically the whole reason behind this gallery exhibit. And it's been a really great experience for me.
Oh, good. Yeah, and the other thing I didn't mention was you created new pieces for this exhibit. So you had some ideas, and you brought them to fruition. And I just can you say something about what that was like to create for the exhibit, how that might be different from what you normally make, and just kind of that experience?
Sure. For this exhibit, yeah, like you said, the pieces were created specifically for this exhibit. And there are some that I may revisit into a production kind of way, but for me, it was having that story and putting it out there for pieces that can combine, be in a show together, but could also stand alone. And it was challenging, and it was exciting to create for an exhibit, and not think about getting big with one thing. Like, I will show an example of something is I make different platters and stuff that I produce Minnesota wise or whatever, and I make multiples of those, but not having to think that I had to make multiples just made me just kind of go a little crazy in my studio and have a lot of fun. Open the door to trying different things and different subject matter, and really thinking about the purpose behind everything I was making, like what I wanted to convey in that piece, because every piece I made for the show is recovery based. It has a story. There's a connection between me, my experience, and that piece of art. And so it's kind of like a timeline of my recovery is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good challenge, and I'm glad I did it.
Good.
Are any of your pieces in the exhibit for sale?
Yes, there are pieces that are listed for sale, and there are some pieces that are not listed for sale. So, yep.
And Kate, how do you, speaking of, putting pieces up for sale, how do you decide what you want to charge for something? And maybe that's two different questions for your production line and the
Right.
exhibit, but what goes through your mind? Is it based on time? Is it based on size? Give us an idea of how you price things.
Right. Well, pricing my work for the show, it was the time, like my platters that I did for the show, they're not too far off from what I would charge when I'm at a arts festival or anything. So maybe a little bit higher because they were a lot more time consuming than my regular pieces because I use multiple layers of transfers that I draw and make. And some of the pieces, like my we do recover big tiled piece that has fused glass in it. They're tiny little fused tiles I made, multiple ones, but that took a lot of time. And so I do base it on time, material, and the lower price items are something that I could reproduce a little bit easier. But things that are higher priced, I will not probably consider doing that again. So that's kind of how I go. My production wear, when I'm creating for on the road show, like I try to keep my prices at the same price point, not depending on the imagery, even if something takes a lot longer to draw, because every single piece I make is an individual drawing, and it's a monoprint process that can only be used one time. So if I'm doing my printmaking on my clay, and if I mess up, that piece is just done. So there's a little bit of skill involved there and time. But for the show, I was making specifically for the show. There's no guarantee I will reproduce anything. So,
yeah.
Can you talk about like these monoprints and this process? Like, how did you learn how to do it, and the time that it takes? And
right. So, oh gosh, my dog is barking like crazy, and I apologize for that. But the monoprint process is something that I started playing with about 5 years ago, and it was about a year into me getting back into pottery, and I was just really, really studying a lot of different artists and their processes, and reading a lot and exploring. So I found a couple artists who do the monoprint process, and I really started to, follow them on social media, take workshops, and I learned a lot. But then I also started just playing, having fun, and trying different things. And I found what I like, and I'll show you an example. So this is my drawings. It's just on newsprint paper, and it's underglaze. So I can draw on the paper, and it dries on the paper, and this will last for a long time. And what I do is I take clay and I mix mason stains with the clay to create a palette, and I paint in all of my drawings. So on the paper, and I let that dry. It can't completely dry, or that clay will pop off the paper. But once it gets to the point where I know it loses its glossy sheen of a wet clay, I cover the whole piece with another layer of watered down clay, so it's slip, and then that has to dry for quite a while until it gets just to the right dryness where I can touch it and it doesn't lift off onto my finger. And once it gets to that point, I can print it on my clay, which is my form that's already cut out and ready for the printmaking process. So it's a little time consuming, and my family knows that when I'm printing, you do not bug mom. I'm going to have 4 hours of uninterrupted time in my studio. And if you're hungry, make your own food. So, so it is it takes a while. So what I do in my making process is when I am making something, like I made these Minnesota signs, and they're not a huge product, but I will draw up my Minnesota and get it ready for, everything is drawn either the night before or it could be the week before. So I have a certain amount that I'm going to be printing, and I plan for that. So then my production that next day or the next week, I am just making those signs for that day, and I make as many as I've drawn out. So there's a little bit of planning. And for me, that's how I work my production is when I'm making mugs, I'm only making mugs. And that's all I make for 3 weeks at a time. And if I'm making platters, I'm making platters for that week or 2 weeks. And for me, what works is I can plan better. So because of the different shapes, my drawings are all, I can go a little bit faster with my drawing. And then it also is more efficient for firing process because my forms and my shapes are all the same in whatever I'm making. So I can really stack up my kiln and get, it's just so much more efficient as a potter than having a lot of empty spaces or spaces that can't be filled. So that is how I kind of roll.
Kate, did you say, so like, for example, the Minnesota piece, so if you have 30 of those, that means you're going to write the Minnesota 30 different times.
30 different times, and
Okay.
it's everything that has a word on it is done in reverse. It has to be drawn in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
Process. And what I do is I'll draw up my original drawing, and then I use a light box to recreate that drawing over and over and over. And I'm using it's a liquid underglaze to draw with, so it's kind of like paint, a paint pen, almost. It's a squeeze bottle, but I make a lot of mistakes and I fail every day, and that's okay. But I work really hard. So.
And so in that process, you're telling us, your whole process from start to finish. What is there a part of that process that's your favorite that you really, if you could pick one piece, which one would it be that you really enjoy?
Yeah. My favorite part of the printmaking process on clay is it's not the piece that I'm making or a certain shape or a mug or a vase, but it's the reveal. It's taking the print off and seeing what is underneath. Did it turn out? It's kind of always a mystery. I have a pretty good idea what it's going to be now, but initially when I started this process, I had no idea what was taking place. So it was just like this big reveal, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but that is still my favorite part of the process, is peeling off the paper and seeing things come together. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
So have you had some experiences where things turned out so much better than what you imagined? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So last summer, it was actually last March, I started doing a series of my hometown, and I was drawing buildings like our arena and our theater and some just hot spots and memory places that I have a lot of connection with. And I thought, I don't know if this is going to be great. But once I saw the print on the clay, and I said, this is going to be okay. And it surprised me that they took off and people really responded to them. And it's not just my art that they responded to, but it was the connection to the place. Living in a small town, it's often, it's so small, there's not much there. But once you start looking and you really pay attention, there's a lot of great things, no matter the size of where you're at. So that's something I celebrated, or I tried to celebrate myself in creating stuff that is just for my hometown. It was a
Um, can you tell us about some of your creative influences, like different people in your life when you think back? These people were really key with my creativity. And then a second part of that question is, who do you have some artists that you really admire or look up to?
yeah. So growing up, I was always a mess maker. I was a
Hmm.
creative little person, and I had a very very great friend named Maggie Adams, and she was a local artist, and she and her husband ran the newspaper in town, but they lived in this fascinating house on the river, and I would I would go over to her house often and sit on her porch and draw with her, and she would, show me how to watercolor and take me into her studio, and that was something that I will never forget because it was in my life, but it wasn't as prevalent as when I went to her house. And and then my mom was always a creative person. She bounced from one thing to another and encouraged me to make stuff. And, she was a great influence for raising a creative person. Um, now, today there are certain ceramic artists I follow and different painters, but one of the biggest is Katie Miller. She does the same technique that I do, mono printing, and she's just huge in the ceramic world. She's a big influencer and has just really been great for anyone who wants to learn the process. And um, she's an educator in the world. And another one is Jen Allen. I've taken workshops from her, and she does a lot more with textures, and I incorporate a lot of texture into my work on different pieces too. So I like her process, and her forms are a little bit more sculptural. They have a lot of fun shapes and with the textures combined. And so I follow her. And another one is Amy Sanders, and she does a combination of both. She does the printmaking on clay, and then she also does the textures. So I kind of follow those three a little bit more. And I've taken workshops from all of them, learning the different techniques and processes and creative thoughts that they use in their work. So they are some of my top three, but I follow a lot of people. There's a lot of people to learn from. I mean, those three are three, but there's many that I follow, and there's so much to learn. And clay is such a wonderful medium for somebody like me who struggles with doing the same thing all of the time. Like, what my process gives to me is the opportunity to create different imagery and ideas and put it on maybe a similar form that can speak in different ways to different people. So, yeah.
So, you mentioned workshops. Has that been most of your artistic training, or where you learn things? Or can you talk about the workshops, and then if there are other ways that you've learned?
Well, I'll start from my schooling. So I have a degree in art education. I went to school. I finished my schooling at Moorhead State University a long time ago. And ceramics was my area where I spent most of my time. It was something that became, I was very attracted to the ceramic process and everything about it. My work was very different at that time. I did a lot more wheel thrown work, and today I do mostly hand building. But I graduated with that degree, and when I graduated, I got a little scoop on some equipment that was no longer able to be used at a location, and they can't sell it or give it away. But I knew that it was going to be at a dumpster at a certain time. So I went to the dumpster in my old college car, and I loaded up this wheel, and I came home after graduation with a wheel and plugged it right in. And so, an artist has a wheel, you got to buy a kiln, and it all started to a studio just slowly started to form. And it was the best thing ever because I didn't have a huge investment in being able to create pottery, because pottery, if you wanted to start a studio, there is some cost involved, but it was just kind of a big incentive for me to keep going. And I started working every day on pottery, and in my spare time, and started to slowly start selling it. And then I opened a business, and my life was not consistent in where I lived, so my location changed quite regularly. And so whenever I was home, that's what I was doing. I was making pottery, and started selling it and opened a business. And my after my husband and I moved back from the South, we came back to Minnesota, and he had his career that he was changing, and I decided it was time to focus on my passion. And so I opened up a ceramic studio in Brainerd, well, Lakeshore, but down by Brainerd, and started traveling all over Minnesota, attending festivals and fairs. And it was a wonderful location at the time for us, and but it didn't last long. So I became a mother and decided to close my business and move up north. And so I did not do pottery for 11 years. And that is when life got slippery and messy, and my addiction started, and things weren't, I guess I wasn't happy as a person, because, and what I did find is that once I got through the rough patches and started creating again, my life got a lot better. And so today, I that's an important part of well, it is what I do. I'm strictly doing ceramics now, and it's a big part of my recovery and my happiness, and it's doing whatever it takes. So I forgot the rest of the question though.
Workshops or
Yes. So
where you've learned.
as I started getting back into pottery after the 11-year hiatus, I was just really soaking up as much information and exploring many techniques, and then started taking mostly online workshops. And during COVID, that was like something to look forward to, are the online workshops. And just for me as a visual person, it's just seeing the process take place. I can learn a lot, and hearing the artists explain their making ways. I was able to just gather a lot, and I've taken many workshops in the last multiple years. So it's it's the continuing ed I need as a self-employed artist, and which is exactly what I needed. So, but yeah, workshops for ceramic arts, you don't necessarily have to go and be in person, but in person would be ideal. But today there are a lot of learning tools and artists that offer workshops online so that you can purchase and watch as many times as you want. But I'm going to be leading a ceramic workshop in April in Minnesota. It's through the Bagley Art Center. And I will be doing in-person workshop, going through my printmaking process on clay for 1 week. It will be a week-long workshop, and that will be coming up in April. And it's something I haven't done. Again, it's another new experience for me to be teaching at a different location. I've done a lot of teaching in my own studio, but I'm really looking forward to it. And, I know that there's going to be a lot of learning on my end, because every time I teach, I learn so much from other people, and just kind of exploring like what direction I want to go as an artist. Do I want to pursue more of an education, or do I want to stay in more of a production, attending fairs? And one thing I have done is I used to sell online, and as I've grown in my small business, I was having growing pains and I was feeling overwhelmed. And what I needed to do is I needed to decide what was my biggest stressor. And it was the shipping and online portion of it. And I didn't enjoy it. And I realized that when I would go to an art festival and talk to people in person and see the joy that they experience through my work, that's what fed me. That's what really gave me my boost that I needed. And so I decided to quit selling online and just go for the happy, because in the end, that's all that matters. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm still pursuing different things on different levels, but the ultimate goal is just to be a happy artist. Yeah.
Speaking of your studio and how you moved it so many times, can you kind of give us a little tour, even if you can't
I
walk
sure can.
everywhere? But yeah,
Maybe I'll just swivel. I'll do
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna start here. This is my slab rollers behind me. I don't know how to do this, but anyways, I'll just keep swiveling. I am in a basement of my home, so I work directly out of my home, which is a dream because prior to this, I worked in a garage with one light bulb, and I had to bucket in all my water. But so in the back, you can see I have my kiln actually running right now, and it's vented, so it's a healthy space. Right now, my vent's off for this interview, but I keep turning, and I have my own sink, which is great. A lot of shelving. You can see a lot of my supplies here. These are my colored slips that I work. If you see those colored, those are clay. So it is just a white clay that I add mason stains to create my palette. And I will take you back here. This is really weird for me because I'm not used to it. It's kind of messy, but I have a drawing area and a supply area. And I have a lot of work that's starting to stack up. And generally, when I am in production, I make the work, and in the winter, I pack it up right away, because my goal is not to have my work in my space. I want it out of the space, because for me, I feel like I get overwhelmed with too much stuff around me when I'm making. So I box it up and it's ready. So when spring comes, it's either going in the trailer to a sale or it's going out to my barn. And that's just the way it works for me. Everyone has their own way, but I will show you some of my work. I'm trying to figure out this camera here. So I set out a little display of some work that I'm doing for the summer. So here. Now this is, I know I will be at Bemidji for their show. So I, of course, Babe and the Blue Ox, or Paul Bunyan, and some smaller pieces. And I have mugs for them. I'm kind of embracing, like I said, the Minnesota theme right now this summer, because of where I've applied to shows, and I haven't been accepted to all of them, but some loons for Land of the Loon is a place I'm in Virginia that I'm hoping to get into. And this is just because it's Minnesota, the lady slipper but I have some lighthouses that I've created for, this is actually the lighthouse in Duluth at the North Shore. And I also drew up a split rock. So these are little hangers that hang on the wall. But then, of course, I do it one time and then I have to do it in bright colors. I like everything in color. I've been playing with forms like mugs. Here's some mugs. I've been making more sculptural mugs with a little bit more detailing and texture. So you can see and these are a little bit bigger than my average mug, but I've been making a lot of footed bowls with multiple prints and vases. But here's a Minnesota thing. You got to have the walleye. So been playing with that. And one thing that I really like zip codes. And so I did a lot of Roseau zip codes last year,
Oh, cool.
and now I've been starting to work on Warroad, Green. No, I don't remember who lives here, but Warroad, Greenbush, and Badger. So kind of my surrounding area. And then kind of my biggest seller throughout the state of Minnesota is my mosquitoes. You can see they have, some of them have a little bit of red bellies, but but I also work with a lot of florals and Scandinavian themes. And one thing I do love is to create for a show. It's kind of like doing a small gallery exhibit. But that's just kind of, that's the way my mind works and what makes me happy. So that's about it.
Cool.
So, how many shows do you usually go to? And can you talk about the barn sales and then any other places where people might be able to buy your work?
Right. That is, selling my work is a challenge for me. I love going to shows, and this is why I've kind of chosen that avenue. Is I like the just getting on the road and going somewhere and having to set up a booth and unpack my wares and display them for a short time, because I really like people in limited quantities, because after that I get a little bit, I'm like ready to go back into my studio and dig into what I'm doing, and the making process, because that is my favorite thing, is to make stuff. But I only sell in person, and that is something it's just what I'm doing right now, and that can change any moment. I apply to shows, and once I'm accepted into the shows, I start listing them on my website, which is prettydirtpottery.com. And I don't do a ton of shows. I do maybe 6 to 8 shows that I apply to with that have they're juried shows, so you have to get accepted into them. And then there's no guarantee with any show because of weather. You just don't know what you're going to get. But it's a gamble, and whatever I don't sell, or even before I don't, I'll take some pieces out before I go for a certain collection, and I put them in this little barn I moved onto my property, because I live right in the heart of Roseau, and I will just throw up on my social media, like if I'm having a pop-up sale, or I'll open my doors, or people can come or contact me and we'll do an appointment and they can pick up wares. But so I'm not very consistent in the selling as an artist. I'm fortunate enough that I have a husband who supports me in this avenue of life. And because I schedule everything around my family. And if my family has something, that is always going to be first. And because I have 3 kids who are growing up really fast, and it's easy for me to do what I want to do, but they're not going to be here forever. And once they're out of the house, I can be selling like a gypsy. So for now, that's what I'm doing in my small business. So
Great. Can you how would I ask this? What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, if I could go back, I think I wouldn't have put everything on hold. Not that being a mom is a big deal, and being a stay-at-home mom is the hardest job I have ever had. But because I took that as the only thing I decided to do, I let a lot of things that were really important to me not happen. And as an artist, I think that, and as a mother and as a woman, I would say, don't ever put yourself last. Just keep yourself just up there. The expectations that we put on different parts of our life, are going to be different, but for me, I think once I started putting some expectations on myself for what I wanted, my life started to get better. I started to become a better artist. People took me more seriously as an artist. And I think, just believing in yourself that, it's going to take a lot of time and a hard work to become an artist who is just creating art full time. And it does take a lot of time and hard work. And I guess I'm lucky in the fact that I was able to take that time being home. And what that did is it made my kids have to kind of figure things out a little bit. I wasn't making every sandwich for them. There's bread inside now. I'm in the garage working. Now you go figure out the bread and peanut butter. Think you got that, and it's giving them permission to grow up and me not have to be there to, hey, do everything for them. And I think it's been good for everyone in my family. Yeah. So.
Did anyone else in your family, are they interested in the arts or ceramics? Do they like to?
Oh, my daughter. So I have 2 boys and a girl. My daughter is 9 and she is just a little creator in everything, right? And she loves to come down in the studio. And even when she was young, she would come into my studio when she was 3 years old, and she would just come in there to wash all my brushes. She would sit there and wash my brushes and wash all my tools. And so she's been involved, and she's very creative. My sons, there's a potential there, but they're busy with other things, which is fine. So.
Do you ever have creative blocks? And if you do, what do you do about that? And then I guess another question would be, are there times you are extra creative, or is there a certain time, like in the mornings or certain times of the year or right before an exhibit or something?
Yeah. Oh, well, I do have creative block once in a while. One thing that I've learned through the many years is for me, when I have an idea or when I see something that I think I can really pull into for work, I have been working on this. I'm not great at it all the time, but writing it down. So I have a bank of ideas that I can revisit if I get to the point where I'm a little bit, just needing a change or wanting to try something different. So that is something that has helped me, and I had to learn that. But I've been pretty good recently, just keeping things going. And there are days where I just have to not have a plan, just so I can just play and create. And once in a while, there's something that I make by accident that is something that I find could be a real great thing that people might like. And those unexpected things are kind of the best treasures for me, what I get excited about. Another thing is that my work schedule is really a little bit insane because I work from home and I'm a horrible sleeper. And the pottery process is slow because there's so much for what I'm doing when I'm printing and stuff. There's a lot of drying time in between the next step and what I can do. So I get up at I'm in my studio at least by 2:30 a.m. every morning, and which is really weird. I know, but it works for me, and that's okay. But I get about 5 hours of uninterrupted time in the morning before we make breakfast and the kids are up and before saying goodbye to them. And so it's nice that I can work. I can spend time with my kids at the beginning of their day. And then I come back to work and I work for sometimes it's the rest of the day. Sometimes I just go until I know it's time to be done. But as a small business, doing everything, doing the firing, doing the packaging, doing everything, it takes a lot more time. So on average, I put in about 12 to 14 hours a day. And, you know,
Oh,
and I'm not complaining because I would love to spend more time. But I'm like, that's enough. I need to remind myself that's enough. There's other things that are more important than just what I want to do. So, but then on occasion, I give myself a break and, you know, little time off to go to hockey tournaments and do things with my kids or go to the lake. And so it's finding that balance. So, yeah.
Do you ever teach workshops or things in Roseau? And you mentioned you have an art education degree. Do you do residencies in schools or anything?
Right. So this year was the first winter. I have been teaching classes in the past couple of years, but they're grant based. So if I receive a grant funding in order to teach the classes, then I teach the classes. This year I did not receive the grant that funds a lot of the extra time, the materials, the cost of firing and all that, because I do charge for my classes, but it's not a very extreme fee that I charge. It's more, just, hey, there's value in this class, So people are understanding that, yes, there is. But pottery is, it can be expensive if you're just doing it for a little while. My time has become more valuable. And so, but not receiving that grant, I was a little worried about it. But when I write a grant, this is my idea, is I write a grant, and as soon as I submit it, I immediately start planning that I'm not going to get that grant. So I had things that I have been kind of holding off on the last couple of years that now I have time for. And so, and it's the big things to me that I want to do as an artist, and in the future I'll share about them, but it's just kind of a different avenue, and I think it happens on purpose. Maybe the timing was right. So but I am teaching the workshop through the Bagley Art Center, and that will be commercial. And so that is something that I get to pursue now because I didn't get that grant, because it frees up my time to try something different like that too. So I do teach. I just am not, like most things in my life, I'm not consistent. I'm still really feeling out what, maybe I never have to figure out where I belong because I'm doing okay. Yeah.
okay, great. Is there anything that we haven't really touched on that you want to say? Anything about your life or the exhibit or your work?
I'm trying to think. I will share with you this. So I do a lot of social media posting. Not a lot. I that's something I have to work at, is the social media, because it's not necessarily my favorite thing, but it's important for my work. And one thing I started doing, in not all of my posts, but when I'm getting overwhelmed or where I'm starting to receive a lot of messages or feeling like a lot of pressure, which can, a person in recovery has to be aware of how to respond. For me, I do know what I needed to do is I needed to come up with a way of saying kindly that I can only do so much. And sometimes what I will write, and sometimes people don't like this response, but I will write that I am one artist doing the best I can and what is best for me. When somebody does not like that I don't ship, or somebody doesn't like that I'm not going to show up at this place, or, that I only sell in person, because sometimes people, well, they don't like it, and it's their problem. And I know that it's not my problem, but my problem is taking care of myself. And so I'll put that statement, and that statement for me is giving myself grace. It's saying that, you know what, I'm doing what I need to do, and that I don't have to make everyone happy all of the time. And after I started doing that, I felt great. And what that did for me is just having that little statement of grace for myself was just letting me kind of not hold those things too personal when I get those comments, and remind myself that I know what is best for me right now at this time, and just to keep moving forward. So that
That's great. Do you, I don't think you mentioned this earlier, but do you do commissions at all? If someone was really wanting something, could they contact you?
I have done commissions, and I got to be honest with you, commission work is not my favorite thing. It is commission work, even though I'm doing work that is similar to, it's my style or whatever, but I have found that there are some jobs that I have taken on as a commission that I've had to decide to cancel, because sometimes people get a little bit too specific, and my creative process is mine, and I have to kind of have that freedom to do what I want. So currently I am not taking on any commission because I'm going with the flow. I'm creating for these different events that I know I'm going to be a part of. And that doesn't mean that I will always say no, always ask, but I'm not always going to say yes. And it's not that I don't want to create for other people, because I do, but it's just, like I said, I'm one artist doing the best I can and what's best for me.
Right.
So, yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, I think we might have lost Kristin. She's had a cold, and so she wasn't sure how this was going to go. So thanks for hanging in there, Kristin, as long as you did. And so, Kate, again, tell us the name of your website.
It's prettydirtpottery.com. So
Okay. And so if people go to that prettydirtpottery.com, they can see your work, they can contact you. Okay.
Yep. And then we'll have a list of events as I get accepted into shows. I will start plugging them in there, and it's the time of year when we start getting our notices. So there's a few up there right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yes. And so the exhibit is The Art of Addiction, and that is running right now. It's Monday through Friday, about 8 to 5. So that's the Northland Community and Technical College, their hours, business hours. And the gallery is, if you park in the front of the college, it's door B as in boy. And it's an awesome gallery. Kate, thank you for creating all of this new work, and for having such an inspiring story and an inspiring gallery.
Thank you. Thank you, Trey.
All right. Okay, well, we're going to leave now, and I'm not sure how we do that, actually.
I don't know either.